Hey guys, this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. This started off as a very long video. I decided to break it up and talk about why I write, the process of how I write, and hopefully give advice to people, not necessarily how to write because your writing style is your own, but if you're suffering from some of the similar conditions that I suffer from, ways that you can try to work around that to try to become a functional writer. But this is more or less a window into my writing style, such that it is, as I've often said, I don't think I'm as good a writer as some people think I am, but it shows you the process. So let's go into it. Another good example of this was Anthem, which took 2 pages once. I always remark this little anecdote to people that what killed me with Anthem. I did get mostly through Anthem before I had to put it down, but very early on he spends 2.5 pages describing the functions of a clock. It wasn't a sexy clock either, it was just a clock. Now as a kind of homage, I spent 1.5 pages in Affinity describing a single kiss, but I felt that was a bit more functional. There was emotion involved and there was reasoning behind that idea. But more often than not, I don't. I will have characters just talk. And they'll talk sometimes for a dozen pages, a single conversation that runs a dozen pages. And I don't think at any point that it's rambling, where it's like, you could cut this off. I go, you know what, I could, but I want that chemistry. Most so often with writers, they will say they had chemistry. I go, you know what, no, I need to show that chemistry. I need to show how they talk to each other. And I had a chapter I just finished, which was 20 pages, and it was 80% of it was a conversation 2 people had, and they were getting closer. And some things were happening where they were interacting with other people. They were doing things. They were getting food, and they were looking at the stars. But more often than not, they were just talking to each other, and they were hearing each other, and they were listening. And it culminated into a kiss, because I wanted that kiss to be earned and not be something where people see a movie and go, these characters didn't spend more than half an hour together. They didn't spend a long period of time, and now suddenly we have to accept the fact that they're in a relationship, and for some reason we do. And I wanted to be a situation where these people who are getting together know each other, where they have formed an emotional connection that we've seen through what they've said, rather than us being told that they got close emotionally. I want people to see that emotional growth in the words and what they say, rather than just being spelled it. And I'm not saying that the other option is bad. I'm not saying that my option is the better. I'm saying that that's how I prefer to tell my stories. But that does come as an issue. That means I'm very light on descriptions, heavy on dialogue. And when you look at something like Dune, it's not heavy on dialogue. It is, once again, you see what's going on in people's minds, but there isn't that much dialogue in comparison to its 170, 180,000 words. And compare that to this, Neil Gaiman's Stardust, which is a fantastic novel. Not as big as you might think. It's only about 70, maybe 80,000 words. It is very dialogue heavy. He does go into details on the setting, but if you look at a page, you'll see people just talking, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a break, but you look at this page here, just as a random page I pulled out, and it's 80% dialogue. And once again, that is a decision that the author made, and I prefer to write that way, because it also reflects my ADHD. As someone with ADHD, when I'm reading a novel, I will generally never skip what people are saying. I will skip descriptions and long tangents talking about an action that takes only a second to do. If it's an action scene, I'm generally going to be interested. Trust me, I read through the Red Wedding in perfect detail. When George explained the details of the wall, I knew and I pictured it in my head. But there are definitely times where I skipped paragraphs because I felt that was unnecessary. If I skip a paragraph and I don't lose anything, I wonder, did we need that descriptive text? Did we need to have that? I already pictured how muddy that road was. I didn't need to go into detail on the wheels and how they were sinking into the mud and so forth. But some people love that exquisite extra detail. And generally, I will do that when I'm doing an action scene or I'm describing something that's not going to have any dialogue. I will go into huge amounts of detail on what you're saying, especially if I want the audience, the reader, to know exactly what I'm saying, exactly what I'm picturing in my mind. But when it comes to people's talking, I will generally remove all of that and I will stick with what they're saying. And I will have the dialogue, I'll have the conversation, and I will let it move organically. And so I would say that with Aiden's Way, Controlling Chaos, certainly with House of Sky, which is another novel I wrote that's not connected to any role-playing game, and especially with Affinity, it is heavy on dialogue, which is ironic considering how complicated the settings are, and I focus so much on the characters and what they're saying. But that comes to what I was saying before, how do I write it? Because unfortunately, as you might have figured out, the speed in which I think is faster than the speed in which I type, which is also faster than the speed in which I talk. So if a character's speaking at a certain rate, I'm writing slower than that. I can't write as fast as somebody talks, especially if it's quick banter. And unfortunately, I am thinking faster than even that. So how do I do that? Well, one way of doing it is that, especially when I'm in the zone, which happens at night, I will generally sit and fire out all the dialogue in one burst. And I can give an example here what I'm talking about. So this is, like I said, this is raw. This is unedited. There's nothing. There's not even partial grammar. I haven't spell checked this. I haven't gone in and even put quotes because that takes time. Right? I've actually indented, which is something I don't usually do. Most of the times it's flat dialogue. And so in this situation, we have this little section. You don't like her, do you? Why do you say? Well, you don't look at anyone like that. So it shows what you know. I look at a lot of people that way. It's just they don't often look back the same way. So we're having this conversation between it's between a father and his daughter, or his adopted daughter. And she's trying to ask him why in the world he has remained single for so long. And there's this available person nearby that she's trying to hook him up with. And he's trying to explain why it may not be a good idea. And I will sit and I'll fire this out really quickly. I have no indications who's saying what. I don't even have quotes. I have gone through and I've fired out the conversation as quickly as possible. This is a very short example because it only goes from here to about here. It was a very quick piece, but there have been situations where I have gone on for 5 to 10 pages of just this. And there have been situations where I have confused myself of who's saying what. And I have to go back to the beginning and go, okay, where was I going with this conversation? Because sometimes, especially at night when I'm in the zone and my mind's working really fast, I'll fire the dialogue and I'll write it as quickly as humanly possible to catch up to my mind, which is thinking what people are saying. And you get that banter, you get some of that humor. And then I'll go to bed. I'll get tired and I'll go to bed. And I'll wake up the next morning and I'll see this and I'll be like, okay, was this good? Was I, and sometimes I look at this and go, nope. One of the things I do whenever I do a rewrite is I cut. I very seldom add. I cut so much, especially for what people say. I'll look over and go, this person's saying too many words. If you ever see any dialogue that I've written, if you ever end up seeing a short film that I'm hoping to get made later this year, I've cut out a lot of unnecessary words to get the point across. Because I do believe that a lot of people don't speak in complete sentences. I mean, I do occasionally, but some people, when they're bantering, they have a tendency to have kind of a broken English, which someone with ADHD is very easy to do because sometimes I'm starting a sentence before I finish the last one. So in this situation, I have fired out all the dialogue. And then when I wake up the next morning, I'll go in and I'll fill in. I'll be indents, I'll add the quotes, and they'll say who's saying what. And if I feel there's an action that needs to be put there, I'll use the action. But very often, I won't. So in situations like this, we have just pure conversation. And there's a few actions here and there, but we go past here, we go to another section where we have this. And we have, once again, it's just dialogue, right? There's a little bit of action right there, but we move, but very often we'll have huge sections of just dialogue. Anyway, this has been Chris. from Deus Ex Machina, and I will see you guys next time. Like and subscribe. Peace.